"Give me 10 children and I'll give a home," the giant cowboy declared, his voice cutting through the suffocating silence of the council room like thunder across a barren plain. The Black Widow stood trembling before them, her request already denied by men who whispered she carried death in her shadow. 3 suitors lay in graves, and now she dared ask for orphan children. They would send her away empty-handed, branded forever as the cursed woman no decent soul should trust. But the towering stranger who owned the largest spread for miles stepped forward, his illiterate hands clutching legal papers he couldn't read, his vast inheritance hanging by threads he couldn't untangle. A marriage of necessity could save them both, or destroy everything they hoped to protect. Would desperation forge salvation, or would 2 outcasts simply fall together into ruin? The murmur of voices died as Etta Mae Jackson stepped into the Cedar Ridge Council chamber. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light streaming through cracked windows. 10 wooden chairs lined the far wall where the men sat in judgment. She clasped her worn leather satchel against her chest. Inside lay her teaching credentials and letters of recommendation from 3 different schools. None of it would matter now. Judith Collier sat in the front row of spectators, her silver hair pulled tight into a bun that matched her pursed lips. The woman's pale eyes tracked Etta Mae's every movement like a hawk watching prey. Council Chairman Bernard Hayes cleared his throat. His jowls shook as he shuffled through papers on the scarred oak table before him. "Mrs. Jackson," Hayes began without looking up, "you've requested custody of the 10 children orphaned by the cholera outbreak." "Yes, sir. I have the means and qualifications to care for them properly." A snort came from somewhere in the gallery. Whispers rippled through the packed room like wind through wheat. Hayes finally raised his eyes. "The town has concerns about your circumstances." Etta Mae's jaw tightened. She knew what came next. The same accusations that followed her everywhere since Thomas died in that mine cave-in 2 years ago. The same poison that killed every chance she'd had since. 3 men courted you after your husband passed," Judith Collier called out from her seat. 3 men now lie in Cedar Ridge Cemetery. The room erupted in murmurs. Hayes banged his gavel twice. "Order, Mrs. Collier, you'll speak when recognized." But the damage was done. Every face in the room showed the same expression, fear mixed with disgust. They saw death walking in a faded blue dress and mended boots. "James Crawford threw himself from his horse the day after he proposed," someone whispered behind Etta Mae. "Marcus Webb choked on his dinner same week he bought that engagement ring. Poor Samuel Miller found him face down in 2 feet of creek water." Etta Mae's hands trembled. She forced them still. These children needed someone who wouldn't give up when voices raised and fingers pointed. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice steady despite the storm building around her, "those were tragic accidents. Nothing more." "Accidents seem to follow you like stray dogs," Hayes replied. "The territorial orphanage in Millbrook can take the children. They have experience with large groups." Etta Mae's heart sank. Millbrook was 200 miles away through dangerous country. Worse, everyone knew what happened to children there. Long days in textile mills, meager food, harsh discipline that broke spirits along with bodies. "Sir, those children know me. I taught most of them before their parents passed. They need stability, not another upheaval. They need to be alive." Judith Collier stood up despite Hayes banging his gavel. "That cursed woman shouldn't be within 10 miles of innocent children." The room exploded into shouts of agreement. Hayes pounded his gavel until the handle cracked. Then the back door opened. Every head turned toward the massive figure filling the doorway. The man had to duck to enter the room. His shoulders nearly touched both sides of the frame. Sunlight behind him cast his face in shadow, but his presence commanded instant silence. He moved down the center aisle with measured steps. His boots struck the wooden floor like drumbeats. The crowd parted without thinking, instinct driving them away from something primal and powerful. Etta Mae had seen him around town, but never up close. He'd bought the old Harrison spread 6 months ago, kept to himself mostly. Some said he was running from something back east. Others claimed he'd made his fortune in cattle drives up north. Now she could see the intelligence in his dark eyes, the careful way he observed everything before speaking. This was not a man who acted without thinking. He stopped beside Edamy's chair. Up close, he towered over everyone in the room. His presence changed the very air, making it thick with possibility and danger. "Chairman Hayes," his voice rumbled like distant thunder. "I have a solution to your problem." The room held its breath. Even Judith Collier sank back into her seat. The giant's gaze swept across the council members, then settled on Edamy. Something passed between them in that moment. Understanding. Recognition. Two people with secrets finding each other in a room full of judgment. He turned back to the stunned council. "Give me 10 children, and I'll give a home." If you are enjoying this story of how one declaration can change everything forever, don't forget to comment where you are tuning in from to show how this story can connect us across any distances, backgrounds, and hearts. Because what will happen in the next 15 minutes in Cedar Ridge will completely change the fate of 10 orphaned children and 2 desperate souls seeking redemption. The council chamber fell silent as death. Every eye fixed on the giant who just offered to take 10 orphaned children. Chairman Hayes gripped his cracked gavel so tight his knuckles went white. "Mr. McGraw," Hayes stammered. "You can't be serious." Cashin McGraw stood motionless as a mountain. His weathered hands hung loose at his sides. No fidgeting, no nervous energy, just solid presence that made smaller men feel like children. "I own 800 acres outside town. Main house has 12 rooms, 3 outbuildings suitable for schooling and work. Creek runs year-round through the property." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The Harrison spread was the largest in the territory. Rich soil, good water, prime grazing land that had made the previous owner wealthy before consumption took him. Judith Collier shot to her feet again. "You've been in Cedar Ridge 6 months. Nobody knows anything about you." McGraw's dark eyes settled on her. She wilted under his gaze like flowers under desert sun. "Know enough," he said simply. Hayes shuffled his papers again. A nervous habit that fooled nobody. The chairman was drowning and grabbing for any rope. "Mr. McGraw, caring for 10 children requires more than land and buildings. They need proper guidance, education, a woman's influence." That's when McGraw dropped his bombshell. "Mrs. Jackson and I will marry." The room exploded. Shouts of surprise mixed with gasps of horror. Someone in the back called out that the devil had finally come to claim his bride. Another voice wondered if the curse would kill the giant too. Edamy's world spun sideways. She gripped her chair arms to keep from falling. This stranger was offering marriage to save children he'd never met. It made no sense. Men didn't sacrifice themselves for others, not in her experience. Hayes banged his broken gavel until pieces of wood scattered across his table. "Order! I will have order!" The noise gradually died to whispers. McGraw waited patiently through it all. Storm winds meant nothing to mountains. "Mr. McGraw," Hayes said when quiet returned, "marriage is a sacred institution, not a business arrangement. Plenty of marriages started as business arrangements. Most work better than the other kind." Edamy studied his profile. Strong jaw, weathered skin that spoke of years under open sky, but something else lurked behind those careful words. Desperation, maybe, or secrets that ran as deep as her own. "This is madness," Judith Collier declared. "You chain yourself to that cursed woman for the sake of orphans." McGraw turned his full attention to her. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Seems like good people dying around someone might mean they were meant to protect her. Ever think of that?" The observation hit like lightning. Murmurs took on a different tone. Thoughtful instead of fearful. What if the deaths weren't a curse but something else entirely? Hayes cleared his throat. "Even if we considered this proposal, the territorial government requires proper documentation. Background checks. Character references. Have them." McGraw reached into his coat pocket and produced a thick envelope. Military service record, property deeds, bank statements, letters from 3 different cattlemen's associations. He placed the papers on Hayes' table with deliberate care. The chairman's eyes widened as he scanned the documents. "You served in the Union Army, cavalry, 4 years. It says here you received commendations for bravery." McGraw's jaw tightened. "Wars make heroes of men who just want to go home." Hayes continued reading. His eyebrows climbed higher with each page. "Mr. McGraw, these financial statements show considerable assets. Why involve yourself with this situation?" For the first time, uncertainty flickered across McGraw's features. He glanced at Edemy, then back to the council. "Man gets tired of living alone." The simple honesty in those words cut through every objection. Even Judith Collier fell silent. Everyone in that room understood loneliness. The frontier bred it like cattle bred calves. Council member Thomas Wright spoke up from the far end of the table. "What about you, Mrs. Jackson? Do you consent to this arrangement?" All eyes turned to her. Edemy felt the weight of 10 young lives pressing down like boulders. Those children were sleeping in the church basement tonight. Tomorrow they'd be loaded into wagons bound for the territorial orphanage if she couldn't find another solution. She looked up at McGraw towering beside her chair. His expression revealed nothing, but something in his eyes suggested this proposal cost him more than anyone realized. "I need to speak with Mr. McGraw privately before answering." Hayes nodded reluctantly. "The council will recess for 15 minutes. The crowd began filing out, voices buzzing with speculation. Judith Collier shot poisonous looks at both Edemy and McGraw before stalking from the room. Soon only the two of them remained in the empty chamber. Afternoon sunlight slanted through dust-covered windows, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. McGraw settled his massive frame into the chair beside hers. Up close she could see the careful intelligence behind his weathered features. This was not a simple man despite his sparse words. "Why?" she asked. He was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried depth she hadn't expected. "Same reason you're willing to marry a stranger. Sometimes saving others is the only way to save yourself." The McGraw property stretched beyond the horizon like a promise of better days. Edemy sat beside Cashin on the wagon seat as they approached the main house. Her hands trembled despite her efforts to remain calm. Behind them, 10 children huddled in the wagon bed. Their faces showed the hollow look of those who'd lost everything twice. First their parents, now their familiar world. The youngest, 8-year-old Benji Willis, pressed against her back. He'd barely spoken since the cholera took his family 3 weeks ago. His small fingers clutched a leather pouch that never left his side. Cashin guided the horses down a well-maintained road lined with oak trees. The man clearly understood land management. Fences stood straight and strong. Pastures showed careful rotation. Even the road bore signs of regular grading. The house rose before them like something from a storybook. 2 stories of solid timber and stone. Wide porches wrapped around 3 sides. Windows gleamed despite months without a woman's touch. "It's beautiful," whispered Mary Catherine, the oldest girl at 16. Cashin's shoulders relaxed slightly at the praise. "Built to last. Previous owner spared no expense." They pulled up to the front porch where steps led to double doors flanked by carved columns. Edemy had never seen such craftsmanship outside of Denver or Kansas City. As the children climbed down from the wagon, Cashin moved to help her. His hand engulfed hers completely. Calloused but gentle. The touch sent unexpected warmth up her arm. "Thank you," she said softly. He nodded and released her hand. "Welcome home." The words carried weight beyond politeness. This wasn't just shelter. It was sanctuary for the unwanted and forgotten. Inside, the house proved even more impressive. The main room soared to the 2nd floor with a stone fireplace large enough to roast a whole steer. Furniture filled the space without crowding. Everything built for durability rather than fashion. "Children, gather around," Edemy called. They formed a semicircle before the cold fireplace. Fear and wonder warred in their young faces. Cashin stood near the windows, giving them space while remaining close enough to help if needed. The man understood boundaries better than most. "This is your home now," she began. "Mr. McGraw has graciously offered us shelter and protection. In return, we'll work together to maintain the property and continue your education." 12-year-old Samuel raised his hand. "Ma'am, will we have chores like before?" "Yes. Everyone contributes according to their abilities." Young Thomas, barely 6, stepped closer to her skirts. "Will you leave us too?" The question pierced her heart. These children had learned that adults disappeared without warning. Death or abandonment made little difference to a child's grief. She knelt and gathered him close. "I'm not going anywhere, Thomas. None of us are." Over his head, she caught Cashin watching from the window. Something vulnerable flickered across his features before he turned away. After settling the children in their rooms, Cashin led her to his study. The space overwhelmed her with its size and appointments: mahogany desk, leather chairs, built-in bookshelves that stretched floor to ceiling. But something was wrong with the picture. The shelves held few books. The desk bore no papers or correspondence. For a room meant for business, it saw little use. Cashin moved to the massive desk and opened the top drawer. He withdrew a thick folder bound with string. His movements carried the careful precision of someone handling dynamite. "Need to show you something before we finalize our arrangement." He untied the string with steady fingers. The folder fell open to reveal dozens of legal documents: property deeds, bank statements, contracts written in flowing script. "The Harrison family owned this land for 30 years, he began. "Built everything you see with their own hands. When consumption took the old man, his will specified exact conditions for inheritance." Edami moved closer to examine the papers. The handwriting was clear, but the legal language made little sense to her. Still, she could see this represented enormous wealth and responsibility. Property passes to distant relatives back east unless certain requirements are met within 6 months of Harrison's death. What requirements? Cashin's jaw tightened. Must be occupied by an established family. Husband, wife, children. Property must show active use for education or agriculture. The pieces clicked into place. You need a family to keep the land. Yes. When did Harrison die? 4 months ago. 2 months left. No wonder he'd stepped forward so quickly at the council meeting. This wasn't charity. It was desperation disguised as generosity. But something else nagged at her. The way he held the papers. The careful distance he maintained from the desk itself. Like a man afraid of being caught with stolen goods. "Mr. McGraw, do you need help understanding any of these documents?" His face flushed red above his beard. The silence stretched between them like a taut rope. Finally, he spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Can't read them." The admission hung in the air like smoke. This powerful man who commanded respect through presence alone carried a secret that could destroy him. In a world where contracts and agreements governed everything, illiteracy was a crippling disadvantage. "The inheritance," she said carefully. "How did you know about the requirements?" Harrison's lawyer explained it verbally, but now there are disputes. Questions about my legitimacy as heir. They want written proof of compliance. Understanding dawned like sunrise after a long night. He needed her teaching skills more than her feminine influence on the children. Without someone who could navigate the legal complexities, he'd lose everything within weeks. "If we marry," she said slowly, "I could help you read the documents, understand exactly what's required." Relief flooded his features. "You'd do that? In exchange for saving those children?" "Yes." They stood in silence, two desperate people finding salvation in mutual need. Outside, young voices carried on the evening breeze as the children explored their new home. "There's one more condition," Cashin said. "We maintain separate quarters. This is a business arrangement, nothing more." "Agreed." He extended his hand. "Partners then." She shook it firmly. "Partners." The wedding took place 3 days later in Cedar Ridge's small wooden church. Reverend Palmer spoke the words with mechanical precision, while 23 witnesses watched in uncomfortable silence. Most came from morbid curiosity rather than celebration. Edami wore her best dress, a deep blue cotton she'd saved for special occasions that never came. Cashin stood beside her in a black suit that seemed tailored for his massive frame. Neither smiled. Neither pretended this was anything but necessity wrapped in legal ceremony. Judith Collier sat in the front pew, her face pinched like she'd tasted spoiled milk. Behind her, other townspeople whispered behind gloved hands. They were watching a funeral, not a wedding, waiting to see how long the giant would survive the widow's curse. When Reverend Palmer pronounced them husband and wife, Cashin offered his arm with formal courtesy. Edami accepted it with equal reserve. They walked down the aisle as business partners, not newlyweds. The children waited outside the church in their cleanest clothes. 10 faces showed mixtures of hope and uncertainty. They understood this marriage meant survival, but adult motivations remained mysterious. Little Benji stepped forward with a handful of wildflowers he'd picked that morning. His leather pouch hung from a cord around his neck, never leaving his side since his parents died. "For you, Miss Etta," he said softly. The gesture broke something inside her chest. She knelt and accepted the flowers with the reverence due a queen's bouquet. "Thank you, Benji. They're beautiful." He smiled for the first time since she'd known him. The expression transformed his thin face from tragic to angelic. Back at the property, Cashin showed her to the east wing of the house, a comfortable bedroom connected to a small sitting room and private study. Windows faced the morning sun and overlooked the vegetable garden. "This is yours," he said simply. "I occupy the west wing. Children have the upstairs rooms." The arrangement felt strange but practical. Marriage without intimacy, partnership without pretense. She could work with these boundaries. That evening, she established routines that would govern their new life. Breakfast at sunrise, morning chores divided by age and ability, afternoon lessons in the large front room, evening meal followed by family time around the fireplace. The children adapted quickly to structure. 16-year-old Mary Catherine took charge of the younger one's clothing and personal care. Samuel and Robert, the 12-year-old twins, managed livestock feeding. Even 6-year-old Thomas found purpose gathering eggs from the henhouse. But Benji remained apart from the others. He completed his assigned tasks with unusual efficiency, then disappeared for hours at a time. When questioned, he claimed to be exploring or studying plants. Always polite, always evasive. Edemy found him one afternoon behind the barn, crouched over a collection of leaves and flowers arranged in careful patterns. His leather pouch lay open beside him, revealing small glass vials and metal instruments she didn't recognize. "What are you working on?" she asked gently. He looked up with startled eyes, then quickly gathered his materials. "Just looking at plants, Miss Etta, seeing how they grow." The explanation felt incomplete, but she didn't press. The boy had lost his parents in terrible circumstances. Everyone processed grief differently. After the children went to bed each night, she met with Cashin in his study for reading lessons. He'd arranged 2 chairs before the fireplace with a small table between them. Books and documents lay stacked within easy reach. His progress amazed her. The man possessed a sharp mind trapped behind illiteracy's bars. Once freed, his intelligence soared like a hawk released from captivity. "The property deed specifies agricultural or educational use," she read aloud from the inheritance documents. "We satisfy both requirements with the children's schooling and the working farm." Cashin nodded, following along as her finger traced each word. "What about the family requirement? Husband, wife, and children residing permanently on the property. Our marriage certificate and the adoption papers should satisfy any legal challenge." They worked through complex contracts and territorial regulations until her voice grew hoarse. Cashin absorbed every detail with focused intensity. This land meant everything to him, though she still didn't understand why. During their 3rd week together, the first accident occurred. Gerald Morrison had been drinking at Murphy's saloon when he started talking loud about the unnatural arrangement at the McGraw place. Said it was an abomination for a cursed woman to corrupt innocent children. Claimed he might ride out there and set things straight. The next morning, Morrison collapsed outside the general store. Witnesses said he suddenly went rigid as a board, then toppled over like a felled tree. Doc Brennan could find nothing wrong with him, but Morrison remained paralyzed from the neck down for 6 hours. When sensation returned, Morrison couldn't remember anything about the incident. He did, however, develop a sudden reluctance to discuss the McGraw family situation. Word spread through town like wildfire. The Black Widow's curse had struck again, this time without her even being present. She'd been teaching lessons to her children when Morrison collapsed, with all 10 pupils as witnesses. That evening, Benji arrived late for dinner with dirt under his fingernails and leaves in his hair. When questioned about his whereabouts, He mumbled something about studying creek formations and quickly changed the subject. Edami noticed his leather pouch seemed fuller than usual, but the boy's shy smile and obvious affection for her pushed away darker suspicions. Children grieved in mysterious ways. She wouldn't add to his burdens with unfounded fears. Cashin watched these developments with growing concern. He'd begun to notice patterns in the boy's disappearances and the timing of unexplained incidents around town. But Benji's devotion to Edami was absolute. He followed her like a shadow, helped with chores without being asked, and showed remarkable intelligence in his lessons. Whatever secrets the child carried, they came from love, not malice. 3 months into their arrangement, the McGraw homestead had transformed into something approaching paradise. The children's laughter echoed across the property each morning as they completed their chores. Lessons in the front room buzzed with energy as young minds absorbed knowledge like desert soil soaking up rain. Edami watched her pupils with growing pride. Mary Catherine had progressed to advanced mathematics and showed aptitude for bookkeeping. The twins Samuel and Robert could read technical manuals about livestock management. Even little Thomas was spelling simple words and writing his name in careful block letters. But it was Benji who truly amazed her. The 8-year-old absorbed information at an impossible rate. He'd mastered arithmetic in weeks and moved on to basic chemistry principles. His questions about plant biology and natural processes revealed a mind far beyond his years. "Miss Etta," he said one afternoon during science lessons, "why do some flowers smell sweet while others smell terrible?" She paused in her explanation of photosynthesis. Different plants attract different insects for pollination. Sweet smells draw bees and butterflies. Unpleasant odors might attract flies or beetles. His eyes lit up with understanding. So plants can control what creatures come near them. In a way, yes. He nodded thoughtfully and returned to his notes. But something in his expression suggested deeper contemplation than simple academic curiosity. Cashin's reading had progressed remarkably. He now handled complex legal documents with growing confidence. Evening lessons had evolved into genuine discussions about property law, territorial regulations, and business strategy. "The railroad company sent another letter," he said one night, holding up an official document. "They're questioning our compliance with inheritance terms." Edami read over his shoulder, close enough to smell his soap and leather. The proximity felt natural now, comfortable in ways she hadn't expected. "They want proof of educational activities and evidence of permanent family residence. We have both. They're looking for technicalities, reasons to challenge the will." Cashin's jaw tightened. "Why does the railroad want this land so badly?" She pointed to a survey map attached to the letter. "Look at the property boundaries. Your land sits directly in the path of their planned route to Denver. They could save 50 miles of track laying by going straight through your valley." Understanding dawned in his dark eyes. This wasn't about legal compliance. It was about corporate greed disguised as bureaucratic procedure. "What do we do? Document everything. Photograph the children's work. Keep attendance records. Show undeniable proof of educational success." Their partnership had deepened beyond mere convenience. She found herself looking forward to their evening discussions. His insights into land management impressed her, while her knowledge of law and education filled gaps in his understanding. Sometimes their hands brushed while reviewing documents. Sometimes their eyes met across the small table with something warmer than business partnership. Neither acknowledged these moments, but both felt them. The second accident occurred on a Tuesday morning in late September. Harold Guthrie rode out to the property with 2 companions, claiming they wanted to inspect conditions for child welfare purposes. Guthrie worked for the territorial government, but everyone knew he took money from railroad interests. Edami met them at the front gate with cool politeness. "Gentlemen, you're welcome to observe our morning lessons." "We'll inspect the entire property," Guthrie declared with bureaucratic arrogance. "Make sure these children aren't being exploited for labor." She led them through the house and outbuildings, demonstrating the children's educational progress and living conditions. The men found nothing to criticize, which clearly frustrated Guthrie's mission. As they prepared to leave, Guthrie made his real intentions clear. "Mrs. McGraw, this arrangement seems highly irregular. A woman with your history shouldn't be responsible for impressionable children. My history includes 8 years of successful teaching experience. Your history includes 3 dead suitors and suspicious circumstances wherever you go." The words hung in the air like poison gas. His companions nodded agreement, emboldened by their leader's boldness. That's when Guthrie's horse began acting strangely. The animal suddenly reared up on its hind legs, eyes rolling white with terror. Guthrie fought to control the reins as his mount spun in circles, bucking and snorting like it faced mortal danger. Then Guthrie himself began convulsing. His body went rigid while his eyes darted frantically in their sockets. Foam appeared at the corners of his mouth as he toppled from the saddle. His companions dismounted to help, but whatever afflicted Guthrie seemed contagious to the horses. All 3 animals danced and reared, forcing the men to fight for control. For 20 minutes, chaos reigned in the front yard. Guthrie lay twitching on the ground while his friends struggled with terrified horses. Then, as suddenly as it began, the episode ended. Guthrie sat up looking dazed but otherwise unharmed. The horses calmed immediately, standing quietly as if nothing had happened. "What did you do to me?" Guthrie demanded, but his voice carried more fear than anger. "I did nothing but show you our educational facilities." The men left without another word, casting nervous glances over their shoulders. By evening, the story had spread through Cedar Ridge with embellishments that turned 20 minutes into hours of supernatural terror. Etta Mee had been in plain sight throughout the incident, teaching arithmetic to 6 children in the front room. Every pupil could testify to her presence during Guthrie's mysterious affliction. But Benji had been absent from lessons that morning. When she asked about his whereabouts, he claimed he'd been weeding the vegetable garden. His fingernails were indeed dirty, and his clothes showed grass stains. Still, something nagged at her. The boy's leather pouch seemed unusually full, and she'd noticed small glass vials among his possessions. When questioned about them, he said they held specimens for his plant studies. The explanation made sense for a curious child, but the timing of his absences and these strange incidents felt too coincidental for comfort. That night, as word of Guthrie's experience spread through town, 3 neighboring families rode to the property. Not to accuse or condemn, but to quietly ask if Etta Mee might accept their children as students. The Black Widow's curse was becoming the territory's most effective advertisement for educational excellence. The railroad delegation arrived on a crisp October morning, with enough legal documentation to sink a steamboat. 4 men in expensive suits climbed down from a black carriage that looked out of place against the frontier landscape. Etta Mee watched them approach from the front porch, where she'd been reviewing lessons with Mary Catherine. The lead man carried himself with the arrogance of someone accustomed to getting his way through intimidation and money. Cashin emerged from the barn where he'd been helping the twins repair a fence post. His massive frame cast a long shadow as he walked toward the visitors. The contrast between his work clothes and their city attire spoke volumes about the coming confrontation. "Mr. McGraw," the lead man announced without introduction. "I'm Theodore Blackwood, legal representative for the Colorado and Southern Railroad Company. We need to discuss your property status." "Discuss away." Blackwood's smile held no warmth. "Our investigation shows multiple irregularities in your inheritance claim. The will requires an established family unit, but your marriage appears to be one of convenience rather than genuine affection." Etta Mee stepped forward, her teaching experience having taught her to face bullies directly. "Mr. Blackwood, our marriage certificate is legally binding regardless of its motivation. The children are thriving under our care, as anyone can observe. Children who should be in proper institutional care, not isolated on a remote property with a woman of questionable reputation." The words stung because they echoed her own fears. But before she could respond, 10 young voices rose in her defense. "Miss Etta teaches us better than any school," Mary Catherine declared from the porch steps. "She helped me learn to read," added Samuel, moving to stand beside Cashin. One by one, her students gathered around their makeshift parents. Even shy, Thomas left his hiding spot behind the water barrel to join the protective circle. Only Benji remained apart, crouched near the flower garden with his leather pouch open beside him. His small hands worked among the plants while his eyes tracked every word of the confrontation. Blackwood's assistant, a thin man with wire spectacles, consulted a thick folder. Our records show 3 separate incidents of mysterious illnesses affecting men who questioned this arrangement. That suggests ongoing fraud or worse. Coincidence, Cashin said flatly. We'll determine that through proper investigation. The threat hung in the air like smoke from a grass fire. These men hadn't come to negotiate. They'd come to seize property through legal manipulation. That's when the third accident occurred. Blackwood suddenly doubled over, clutching his stomach as if kicked by a mule. His face turned green as pond scum while sweat poured down his forehead in streams. "What's happening to me?" he gasped. His 3 companions backed away in alarm as Blackwood began seeing things that weren't there. He swatted at invisible insects while his eyes darted wildly around the yard. "Get them off me! Get them off!" The hallucinations intensified. Blackwood screamed about swarms of bees covering his skin. He tore at his expensive jacket, ripping buttons in his panic to escape creatures only he could see. His assistant tried to calm him, but Blackwood pushed him away with desperate strength. For 20 minutes, the railroad's lead attorney battled demons that existed only in his mind. Then, as suddenly as it began, the episode ended. Blackwood straightened slowly, his breathing returning to normal. The wild look faded from his eyes, replaced by confusion and embarrassment. "I don't understand what happened," he mumbled. Etta Mee had been standing in plain sight throughout the entire incident, surrounded by her students. Every child could testify to her presence and behavior, but Benji's spot near the garden was now empty. His leather pouch had vanished along with the boy himself. "Perhaps you should return to town," she suggested with careful politeness. "The frontier air sometimes affects city folks strangely." Blackwood's companions helped him back to their carriage. As they drove away, the lead attorney kept looking over his shoulder as if expecting invisible attackers to pursue him. Word of the incident reached Cedar Ridge within hours. By evening, the story had grown into a tale of supernatural vengeance that left Blackwood permanently marked by his encounter with the Black Widow's curse. Etta Mee found Benji an hour later in the barn loft, pretending to read a book about animal husbandry. His clothes were clean, and his hands showed no trace of dirt, but his leather pouch bulged with new contents. "Benji, where did you go during the visit from those men?" His young face showed practiced innocence. "I was scared, Miss Etta. Went to hide in the creek bed like you taught us for emergencies." The explanation made sense. She'd indeed instructed the children to have hiding places in case of Indian raids or other dangers. But something in his eyes suggested layers of truth she wasn't seeing. That evening, Cashin found her in the study reviewing legal documents by lamplight. The railroad's threats weighed heavily on her mind despite their apparent retreat. "They'll be back," she said without looking up. "I know." He settled into his usual chair across from her. "But something's protecting us. Don't know what or how, but these accidents aren't random." She met his gaze across the small table. "You think someone's deliberately causing them, don't you?" The question hung between them like a bridge neither wanted to cross. Suspecting supernatural intervention felt more comfortable than facing the alternative. Because if these incidents were human in origin, that meant someone in their household possessed knowledge dangerous enough to terrify grown men. Someone who cared enough about Etta Mee to risk everything for her protection. Someone small enough to hide in plain sight while wielding power that defied explanation. "Cashin," she said softly, "what do you know about Benji's parents? Died in the cholera outbreak like the others. What did they do for work?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Come to think of it, nobody ever said." The territorial investigation began 2 weeks after Blackwood's mysterious affliction. Marshal William Crawford arrived with a federal deputy and a stack of official papers that could challenge everything they'd built. Crawford was a different breed from the railroad's hired lawyers. Weathered face spoke of years on the frontier. Steady eyes missed nothing. This man wouldn't be frightened away by unexplained incidents or local superstitions. "Mrs. McGraw," he said, removing his hat as she greeted him on the front porch. "I'm here to investigate claims of fraud regarding your inheritance and the children's welfare." "Marshall, you're welcome to observe our daily routine. The children's education and care speak for themselves." Crawford nodded and pulled out a worn notebook. "I'll need to interview each child privately. Standard procedure in custody matters." Etta Mee's stomach clenched, but she maintained her composure. "Of course, they're in morning lessons now if you'd like to begin." The investigation consumed 3 days. Crawford observed classes, examined living conditions, and reviewed every document related to their legal status. His questions were thorough but fair, lacking the hostile edge of previous visitors. The children responded to his quiet authority with honest answers about their treatment and happiness. Even shy Thomas spoke freely about his lessons and daily routine. But it was Benji who impressed Crawford most during his individual interview. "Son, what can you tell me about plants and their properties?" the marshal asked after watching the boy identify dozens of species during a nature walk. Benji's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "Plants are like people, Marshal. Each one has special gifts. Some heal, some harm, some do both depending on how you use them." "That's pretty advanced knowledge for someone your age. My papa taught me before he got sick. He said understanding nature was the most important lesson anyone could learn." Crawford made notes in his book. "What did your father do for work?" "He was a traveling teacher like Mama. They studied plants and helped doctors make medicines." The simple explanation carried profound implications. Benji's parents hadn't been ordinary settlers. They'd been educated professionals with specialized knowledge. Knowledge that might explain certain recent incidents around Cedar Ridge. That evening, Crawford joined Etta Mee and Cashin for dinner. The atmosphere was tense but respectful as they discussed the homestead's operations and future plans. "Your educational results are impressive," Crawford admitted. "These children show advancement that would credit any established school." Relief flooded through Etta Mee. "They're remarkable students. The inheritance requirements appear satisfied based on my observations. Functional family unit, educational use of property, clear evidence of permanence." Cashin leaned forward. "What about the railroad's objections?" Crawford's expression darkened. "That's where things get complicated. 3 separate incidents of mysterious illness affecting men who challenged your arrangement. People are talking about curses and supernatural protection." "Surely you don't believe in such nonsense," Etta Mee said carefully. "I believe in evidence, and the evidence shows a clear pattern. Men threaten your family, then suffer unexplained but temporary afflictions that leave no permanent damage." The marshal's sharp eyes moved between them, searching for tells that might reveal hidden truths. "Someone's protecting you," he continued. "Question is whether that someone uses natural methods or something else entirely." Silence stretched around the dinner table. Outside, evening sounds drifted through open windows. Children's voices carried from the front room where they worked on arithmetic problems. "Marshal," Cashin said finally, "if someone was using natural methods to defend innocent children, would that be illegal?" Crawford considered the question carefully. "Depends on the methods. Intimidation through implied threats might be overlooked. Actual poisoning or assault would not. But if no permanent harm occurred, still illegal, but harder to prosecute without evidence or willing witnesses." The conversation danced around truths none of them wanted to speak aloud, but understanding passed between the 3 adults like a shared secret. Later that night, Crawford found Benji sitting alone on the front porch steps, studying something in his leather pouch by moonlight. "Couldn't sleep?" the marshal asked gently. Benji looked up with those 2 old eyes. "Sometimes I dream about Mama and Papa. They taught me important things before they died." "What kind of things?" "How to help people. How to protect the ones you love." The boy's small hands closed around his pouch. "They said knowledge was only good if you used it to make the world better." Crawford sat beside him on the steps, 2 figures silhouetted against the star-filled sky. "Son, if someone you cared about was in danger, what would you do?" Benji was quiet for a long moment. I'd use everything Papa taught me to keep them safe, even if people didn't understand. Even if it meant scaring bad people away, especially then, the marshal nodded slowly. Your parents would be proud of how you're looking after your new family. You think so? I know so. The next morning, Crawford announced his conclusions to the assembled household. All 10 children gathered in the front room along with Edamie and Cashin. Based on my investigation, I find no evidence of fraud or child endangerment. The inheritance appears legally sound, and the children's welfare exceeds territorial standards. Joy flooded through the room like sunrise after a long night. However, Crawford continued, I strongly recommend avoiding any future incidents that might be misinterpreted as supernatural intervention. His eyes found Benji among the celebrating children. A look of understanding passed between the federal officer and the 8-year-old guardian. Some forms of protection draw unwanted attention, Crawford added meaningfully. Best to let legal channels handle future threats. Benji nodded solemnly, clutching his leather pouch. The investigation was closed. The family was safe. And somewhere in Cedar Ridge, word spread that the federal government had officially blessed the union between the giant cowboy and the woman who was no longer called the Black Widow. She was simply Mrs. McGraw now. Teacher, mother, and the heart of something unprecedented on the frontier. A family bound not by blood, but by choice, courage, and the fierce protection of those who loved them. The truth emerged 3 days after Marshal Crawford's departure, sparked by an act of innocent courage that changed everything. Little Thomas had been chasing an escaped chicken behind the barn when he stumbled and fell into an old well. His screams echoed from 20 feet below, sending everyone running to help. Cashin lowered a rope while Edamie called down reassurances to the terrified 6-year-old. The other children gathered around the well opening, their faces tight with worry for their youngest brother. But it was Benji who acted first. Without hesitation, the 8-year-old opened his leather pouch and pulled out a small glass vial filled with clear liquid. He uncorked it and poured the contents onto a handful of dried leaves from another container. Within seconds, thick white smoke began rising from the mixture. Benji dropped the smoking bundle down the well shaft. Breathe deep, Thomas, he called down. This will help you stay calm until we get you out. Edamie stared at him in amazement. Benji, what was that? Something Papa taught me, for when people get scared in small spaces. The rescue took 30 minutes, but Thomas emerged completely calm despite his terrifying ordeal. The smoke had indeed soothed his panic, allowing him to cooperate with their efforts to pull him to safety. As they carried Thomas back to the house, Edamie's mind raced with implications. Benji's quick thinking and precise knowledge suggested training far beyond casual plant study. That evening, she found him in the barn loft organizing his collection. Glass vials lined up in neat rows, dried plants sorted by type and color, small metal instruments she couldn't identify, everything arranged with scientific precision. Benji, I think it's time you told me about your parents. He looked up from his work with those ancient eyes. For a moment, she saw not a child but someone carrying burdens too heavy for young shoulders. They made medicines, he said quietly, traveled from town to town helping doctors and teaching people about healing plants. Is that all they did? His small hands stilled over a vial of pale green powder. They also protected people sometimes, when bad things happened and nobody else could help. The pieces clicked into place like a puzzle solving itself. The men who got sick after threatening our family. You were protecting us. Tears welled in his eyes. I didn't want you to send me away. You're the first person who was kind to me after Mama and Papa died. Edamie climbed into the loft and gathered him into her arms. His small body shook with suppressed sobs as months of fear and secrecy poured out. Tell me everything, she whispered. Through broken sentences, Benji revealed the truth. His parents had been traveling scientists, part of a network of educated professionals who moved through frontier territories. They studied native plants, developed medical treatments, and occasionally dealt with situations beyond normal law enforcement. Papa said some people only understand consequences, not reason. When sheriffs couldn't help or judges wouldn't listen, they used other methods. What kind of methods? temporary punishments that scared bad people into being good. Nothing permanent. Papa said hurting people was wrong, but frightening them was sometimes necessary. Benji's collection represented years of accumulated knowledge. Each plant served specific purposes. Some induced temporary paralysis. Others caused vivid hallucinations. A few created dramatic but harmless physical symptoms. The man who fell off his horse after threatening you, Benji explained. I put something on his saddle that made the leather smell wrong to horses. Animals know dangerous scents better than people. And Mr. Morrison's paralysis, powder on his coffee cup at the saloon, wears off in a few hours but feels scary while it lasts. Mr. Blackwood's hallucinations, smoke mixture I burned upwind while he was talking, makes people see things that aren't there for a little while. Each incident had been carefully planned and precisely executed. No permanent harm, no lasting damage, just enough terror to send threats scrambling away from their family. Why didn't you tell me before? Fresh tears rolled down his cheeks. Because every time I tried to help people, they sent me away, said I was dangerous or cursed or wrong. Edamy's heart broke for this brilliant child who'd learned to hide his gifts out of necessity. 8 years old and already understanding that being different meant being alone. Benji, what you did was wrong because you didn't trust us to handle these problems together. But I understand why you felt you had no choice. Hope flickered in his eyes. You're not sending me away. Never, but no more secret protection. If someone threatens our family, we face them as a family. Deal, he nodded eagerly, relief flooding his small features. That night she told Cashin everything. His reaction surprised her with its calmness. Figured it was something like that, he said. Boy's been carrying adult responsibility since his parents died. Takes that kind of weight to age someone's eyes like his. What do we do now? Same thing we've always done. Protect our children and give them chances to use their gifts properly. They decided on complete honesty with the family. The next morning, Benji stood before his 9 siblings and explained his secret. Instead of fear or rejection, he found acceptance and amazement. Mary Catherine hugged him fiercely. You were protecting all of us. Samuel grinned with obvious admiration. That's the smartest thing I've ever heard. Even little Thomas patted Benji's shoulder. Thank you for keeping us safe. The family grew stronger through shared truth. No more secrets. No more lonely guardians carrying burdens too heavy for small shoulders. Benji's knowledge became a teaching tool rather than a weapon. He demonstrated plant properties during science lessons, always emphasizing healing over harm. The boy genius had found his place at last. Not as a hidden protector, but as a beloved brother whose gifts made their unconventional family even more remarkable. Marshall Crawford's words echoed in their minds. Some forms of protection draw unwanted attention. From now on, they would face the world openly, honestly, and together. News of the family's honesty spread through Cedar Ridge like wildfire, but the flames carried understanding instead of fear. Within a week, 3 more families had ridden out to request enrollment for their children in what people now called the McGraw Academy. Edamy stood in her expanded classroom, watching 23 students work through mathematics problems. The mixture of ages and backgrounds would have challenged any teacher, but her unconventional methods seemed to reach every child. Benji had become her unofficial assistant, using his plant knowledge to create natural dyes for art projects and demonstrate scientific principles through safe experiments. The other children no longer saw him as different but as gifted in ways that benefited everyone. Miss Etta, called Rebecca Hanson, daughter of a neighboring rancher, Benji says willow bark tea can help headaches. Is that true? Yes, but only adults should prepare medicinal teas. Children should focus on understanding how plants work, not using them for treatment. The distinction was important. Knowledge without responsibility led to dangerous situations, but knowledge paired with wisdom created healers and protectors. Cashin entered the classroom carrying a bundle of mail from town. His reading skills now surpassed many educated men, thanks to months of dedicated evening study. The transformation from illiterate giant to confident landowner had been remarkable to witness. Letter from the territorial capital, he announced, holding up an official envelope. Looks important. Edemy dismissed the children for their afternoon break and opened the correspondence with trembling fingers. Government letters could bring disaster or opportunity with equal likelihood. Her eyes widened as she read. Cashin, they want to designate our school as an official territorial educational facility. What does that mean? Funding, official recognition, protection from interference by railroad companies or other commercial interests. The letter detailed a program designed to support innovative educational approaches in frontier regions. The McGraw Academy's success with diverse students and practical learning methods had attracted attention from territorial education officials. There's more, she continued reading. They want to send an advanced science instructor to work with students showing exceptional aptitude. Both their eyes found Benji through the window. He was teaching younger children how to identify edible plants, his small hands gentle as he guided their observations. He'll have real mentorship, Cashin said softly, proper channels for his gifts. That evening brought unexpected visitors. Doc Brennan arrived with his medical bag and a proposal that would change everything again. Mrs. McGraw, he began after accepting their offer of coffee, I've been thinking about young Benji's knowledge of medicinal plants. Doctor, I hope you understand that we're not encouraging him to practice medicine without proper training. That's exactly what I wanted to discuss. The boy has instinctive understanding that takes most students years to develop. With proper guidance, he could become an exceptional healer. Doc Brennan outlined his plan. Benji would continue his regular education, but spend afternoons learning proper medical applications of his botanical knowledge. The arrangement would formalize his gifts while ensuring responsible development. I need an apprentice anyway, the doctor admitted. These old bones can't handle every emergency call in the territory. Benji could learn to prepare proper medicines and assist with treatments. The proposal represented everything they'd hoped for. Recognition instead of fear, opportunity instead of hiding, a future built on Benji's gifts rather than limited by them. But the decision belonged to Benji himself. They found him on the front porch steps, studying star patterns in the clear night sky. His leather pouch sat beside him, no longer a secret burden but a toolkit for helping others. Benji, Edemy sat beside him, Doc Brennan has made you an offer. She explained the apprenticeship proposal while Cashin settled on the boy's other side. Their presence bracketed him with warmth and security he'd never known before his parents died. Would I still live here with you? Benji asked when she finished. Of course. This would just be afternoon lessons, like the extra reading you do with Mr. Cashin. And I could still help teach the younger children about plants. Doc Brennan specifically requested that you continue sharing your knowledge in safe, educational ways. Benji was quiet for several minutes, processing possibilities and implications with the careful thought that characterized all his decisions. Mama and Papa always said knowledge was meant to help people, he said finally. Maybe this is how I'm supposed to use what they taught me. The next morning brought another transformation. Judith Collier arrived at their front gate, but not as an adversary this time. Her face showed the humility of someone forced to confront their own prejudices. Mrs. McGraw, she began formally, I owe you an apology. Edemy stepped onto the porch, maintaining dignity despite their complicated history. Mrs. Collier, I was wrong about you, about your family, about what you've accomplished here. The older woman's voice carried genuine remorse. I let fear and gossip cloud my judgment. We all make mistakes, Mrs. Collier. I'd like to make amends. My grandson needs proper schooling, and everyone says your academy provides the best education in the territory. The request represented complete vindication. The woman who'd led opposition to their family now sought their help. But Edemy felt no triumph, only sadness for time wasted on unnecessary conflict. Bobby is welcome to join our classes. All children deserve good education regardless of their family's past positions. Relief flooded Judith Collier's features. Thank you truly. As the older woman departed, Cashin emerged from the barn where he'd been pretending not to eavesdrop. Feels good to be right, he observed. Feels better to be accepted. That afternoon, the McGraw Academy welcomed its 24th student. Bobby Collier took his seat among children from every background imaginable, all united by their hunger for knowledge and belonging. Benji began his medical apprenticeship the same day, walking to town with Doc Brennan to learn proper preparation of herbal remedies. His gifts would now serve healing instead of protection. The transformation was complete. Fear had become understanding. Secrets had become shared knowledge. Isolation had become community. Standing in her classroom that evening, Edami marveled at the journey that had brought them here. From desperate bargain to genuine family. From cursed widow to respected educator. The future stretched before them bright with possibility. 6 months passed in a blur of growth and discovery. The McGraw Academy now housed 32 students from across 3 counties. What had begun as desperate necessity had evolved into the territory's most sought-after educational institution. Edami walked through the expanded classrooms in the early morning light, preparing for another day of organized chaos. The main house had been modified with additional rooms, while 2 new buildings provided space for advanced studies and practical workshops. Benji's medical apprenticeship had progressed remarkably. Doc Brennan praised the boy's intuitive understanding of herbal properties and his gentle manner with patients. At 9 years old, he could prepare more effective remedies than some trained physicians. Miss Etta, Mary Catherine called from the mathematics classroom. The territorial inspector arrived early. He's reviewing our records in the main office. This inspection differed from previous investigations. The territorial government was considering the McGraw Academy as a model for frontier education. Success here could lead to similar programs throughout the region. Inspector David Walsh proved to be a serious man with genuine interest in educational innovation. Unlike previous officials, he came seeking solutions rather than problems. "Mrs. McGraw," he said after observing morning lessons, "your methods are unconventional but remarkably effective. Students show advancement rates that exceed territorial averages by significant margins. We focus on practical application alongside academic theory. Children learn better when they understand how knowledge applies to their daily lives." Walsh nodded, making notes in his leather-bound journal. The integration of diverse age groups seems particularly successful. Older students mentoring younger ones while pursuing their own advanced studies. Through the window, they watched Samuel and Robert demonstrating livestock management techniques to younger students. The twins had developed into natural teachers, patient and encouraging with their pupils. "What about young Willis?" Walsh asked. "His scientific knowledge seems extraordinary for his age." "Benji has exceptional gifts, but we ensure he remains a child first and a scholar second. His afternoon medical apprenticeship is carefully supervised by Doc Brennan. I'd like to observe one of his lessons." That afternoon, Benji stood before a mixed group of students explaining the properties of common medicinal plants. His presentation combined scientific accuracy with age-appropriate language that kept everyone engaged. "Willow bark contains compounds that reduce pain and fever," he explained, holding up a piece of dried bark. "But you must steep it properly and use correct amounts or it won't help at all." A younger student raised her hand. "How do you know how much to use?" "Practice and careful measurement. That's why Doc Brennan makes me write down everything we do. Science requires precision." Walsh observed the lesson with growing amazement. This child demonstrated teaching abilities that would credit an adult instructor, yet maintained the enthusiasm and wonder of youth. After classes ended, Walsh interviewed several students privately. Their unanimous praise for the school and their teachers reinforced his growing conviction that something special was happening here. "The McGraw Academy represents exactly the kind of innovation our territory needs," he told Etta Me during their final meeting. "I'm recommending full territorial certification and increased funding." What does that mean practically? Official recognition as a model institution, financial support for expansion, protection from commercial interference, most importantly, replication of your methods in other frontier communities. That evening brought celebration as the family gathered around the dinner table. 32 students, their teachers, and local parents filled the main room for a community feast. Cashin stood to address the crowd, his once hesitant speech now confident and clear. Learning to read had unlocked more than just literacy. It had revealed the intelligent, thoughtful man who'd always existed beneath the silent exterior. 6 months ago, this was just empty buildings and unused land. Tonight, it's home to the finest educational institution in 3 territories. Applause filled the room, but he raised his hand for quiet. This success belongs to everyone who believed in what we were building. Students who worked hard, parents who trusted us with their children, community members who supported our vision. His eyes found Edami across the crowded room. Most of all, it belongs to a woman who saw possibility where others saw problems, who turned desperate necessity into something beautiful. More applause erupted, but Edami felt overwhelmed by emotions too complex for public display. This recognition represented vindication of every choice they'd made. Later, as the last guests departed, she found herself alone with Cashin on the front porch. Stars blazed overhead in the clear mountain air, casting silver light across their peaceful domain. "Hard to believe how far we've come," she said softly. "Sometimes I think about that first day in the council chamber, 2 desperate people making a bargain they didn't understand. Do you regret it?" He turned to face her fully, moonlight revealing the gentleness in his dark eyes. "Marrying you was supposed to save my land. Instead, it saved my life." The words hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Their arrangement had evolved far beyond legal convenience into something neither had expected to find again. "Cashin," she began, but he placed a gentle finger against her lips. "I know we agreed this was just business, but somewhere along the way, business became something else." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'd like to make this marriage real. Not for the land or the children or any other reason except that I love you." The declaration she'd hoped for but never dared expect. After Thomas died, she'd believed herself destined for loneliness. The Black Widow curse seemed too powerful to overcome, but love had found her anyway, disguised as necessity and nurtured through shared purpose. "I love you too," she whispered. They sealed their new beginning with a kiss that tasted of possibility and forever. Around them, their chosen family slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that love would protect them through whatever challenges lay ahead. The transformation was nearly complete. All that remained was making it official and planning for a future that stretched bright with promise across the frontier horizon. 1 year after their business arrangement became a love story, the McGraw Academy had transformed into the pride of the Colorado Territory. Edami stood before her classroom of 35 students, watching them work through advanced mathematical problems that would challenge university pupils. The morning sun streamed through new windows in the expanded main building. 3 additional structures now dotted the property, each serving specialized educational purposes. The old Harrison spread had become a small village dedicated to learning and growth. Benji, now 10 and approaching his 2nd year as Doc Brennan's apprentice, demonstrated proper preparation of willow bark extract to a group of older students. His movements showed the careful precision of someone who understood the responsibility that came with knowledge. "Remember," he instructed with authority beyond his years, "medicine is about helping people heal, not showing off what you know. Every remedy must be prepared exactly right, or it won't work properly." Mary Catherine, now 17 and serving as Edami's teaching assistant, supervised the lesson with pride. The girl had developed into a natural educator, patient with struggling students and encouraging to those who excelled. "Benji's right," she added. "Science without precision is just guessing. Doc Brennan always says measurements matter more than natural talent." Through the window, Edami could see Cashin reviewing expansion plans with territorial architects. The government wanted to establish 5 similar academies across the region, all based on their successful model. His transformation never ceased to amaze her. The silent giant who'd once struggled with simple contracts now negotiated complex agreements and managed multiple construction projects simultaneously. A knock on the classroom door interrupted her observations. Inspector Walsh entered with a distinguished older woman whose expensive clothes and confident bearing suggested official importance. "Mrs. McGraw," Walsh announced, I'd like you to meet Dr. Margaret Whitmore from the Territorial Education Board. She's here to evaluate our recommendation for the Academy's permanent charter." Dr. Whitmore surveyed the busy classroom with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her gaze lingered on Benji's medical demonstration and Mary Catherine's teaching assistants. "Inspector Walsh has made extraordinary claims about this institution," she said crisply. "I'm here to determine if reality matches the reports." "You're welcome to observe our methods and interview anyone you wish," Edami replied. "Our success speaks for itself." The evaluation consumed 3 days. Dr. Whitmore attended classes, reviewed academic records, and conducted extensive interviews with students, parents, and community members. Her questions were thorough and occasionally challenging, but they revealed genuine interest in understanding their educational philosophy rather than finding fault. "Your integration of practical skills with academic subjects is remarkable," she told Edami during their final interview. "Most frontier schools focus on basic literacy and arithmetic. You're producing students ready for university study. Children learn better when they understand how knowledge applies to their lives. Abstract concepts become meaningful when connected to real experiences." And young Willis, his scientific abilities seem far advanced for his age. "Benji has exceptional gifts, but we ensure his education remains balanced. He studies standard subjects alongside his medical apprenticeship." Dr. Whitmore nodded thoughtfully. "I've spoken with Dr. Brennan about the boy's progress. He believes Willis could become one of the territory's finest physicians with proper training." That evening brought the announcement they'd been hoping for. Dr. Whitmore gathered the entire community in the main hall to deliver her decision. "The Territorial Education Board hereby grants the McGraw Academy permanent charter status," she declared to thunderous applause. "Furthermore, we're authorizing funding for immediate expansion and the training of additional instructors." The celebration continued long into the night. Parents, students, and community members shared food and stories, while children ran between the buildings in games of tag and hide-and-seek. Edami found herself surrounded by grateful parents whose children had flourished under her care. Families who'd initially approached with skepticism now spoke of the academy as a miracle that had transformed their lives. "Mrs. McGraw," said James Patterson, father of twin girls in the advanced mathematics class, "my daughters talk about becoming engineers now. Before your school, they didn't even know such opportunities existed for women." Similar stories emerged throughout the evening. Children discovering talents they never knew they possessed. Families planning futures that previous generations couldn't have imagined. Dreams taking root in minds that had once accepted limitation as natural law. Near midnight, as the last guests departed, Edami walked through the quiet buildings with Cashin. Their footsteps echoed in empty classrooms that would ring with young voices again tomorrow. "Remember when this was just a desperate plan to save 10 orphan children?" she asked. "Now we're saving hundreds," he replied, slipping his arm around her shoulders. "And they're saving us right back." They paused in the original classroom where their journey had truly begun. Moonlight illuminated the slate boards covered with mathematical equations and scientific diagrams. "What's next?" she wondered aloud. Dr. Whitmore mentioned establishing similar schools throughout the territory. "They want us to train other instructors in our methods." The prospect excited and intimidated her in equal measure. Sharing their success could transform education across the entire frontier region. But expansion also meant new challenges and responsibilities. "Are you ready to become the territory's leading educational experts?" Cashin asked with gentle humor. "With you as my partner, I'm ready for anything." Their kiss sealed another new beginning. Tomorrow would bring fresh challenges and opportunities, more students seeking knowledge, additional instructors requiring training, communities hoping to replicate their success. But tonight belonged to reflection on how far they'd traveled from that desperate bargain in the Cedar Ridge Council chamber. 2 lonely people had found love through shared purpose. 10 orphaned children had discovered family and future. The McGraw Academy stood as proof that necessity could bloom into something beautiful when nurtured by courage, wisdom, and unconditional love. Their transformation was complete, but their story was just beginning. 2 years after the territorial charter, the McGraw Academy had become a legend across the American frontier. Edamie stood in her expanded classroom, watching 43 students from 7 different territories work through lessons that would have challenged established universities back east. The morning air carried sounds of construction as workers completed the academy's 5th building. This one would house the new teacher training program, where educators from across the region would learn the McGraw methods before establishing similar schools in their own communities. Benji, now 12 and Doc Brennan's official junior partner, moved between student groups with the quiet confidence of someone who'd found his calling. His medical knowledge had saved 3 lives in the past year, earning him respect that transcended his young age. "Miss Sarah," he said to a 10-year-old struggling with plant identification, "remember that leaves grow in patterns. Count the points and notice the edges. Each plant has a signature if you know how to read it." Mary Catherine, now 19 and engaged to a young surveyor from Denver, supervised the advanced mathematics section. Her wedding next month would be the Academy's first, celebrated by a community that had become an extended family. "Mrs. McGraw," called Timothy Morrison, age 8 and newest arrival from Kansas, "when will we start the geography lesson about my home state?" "This afternoon," she replied, smiling at his eagerness. "We'll map the entire route your family traveled to reach us." The integration of personal experiences into academic subjects remained the Academy's hallmark. Children learned by connecting new knowledge to their own lives, making abstract concepts concrete and memorable. Cashin entered the classroom carrying a telegram that had arrived with the morning mail. His face showed the controlled excitement of someone trying not to reveal good news prematurely. "Important message from the territorial capital," he announced. "Seems we have visitors coming next week." Edamie accepted the telegram with curious hands. Her eyes widened as she read the official communication from Governor John Evans himself. "The governor wants to visit," she told the assembled students. "He's considering recommending our academy model to the federal government for nationwide implementation." Excited murmurs filled the classroom. These children understood they were part of something significant, though the full scope remained beyond their young comprehension. That afternoon brought an unexpected arrival that would test everything they'd built. A dusty wagon rolled up the main drive carrying a familiar figure from their earliest days. Marshall Crawford climbed down from the driver's seat, his weathered face showing the strain of hard travel. Behind him in the wagon bed sat a small girl, perhaps 7 years old, clutching a carpetbag with desperate fingers. "Mrs. McGraw," Crawford said after removing his hat, "I've got another one for you. Parents died in a flash flood near Colorado Springs. No family, no place to go." The girl's dark eyes held the hollow look Edamie recognized from her original 10 children. Loss had carved premature wisdom into features that should have shown only childhood innocence. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Edamie asked gently. "Lucy Henderson," came the whispered reply. "Are you the lady who saves children nobody wants?" The question pierced straight through every defense Edamie had built around her heart. This child had heard stories about the McGraw Academy's origins, about a woman who'd taken in the unwanted and given them hope. "I'm the lady who gives children homes where they can discover how special they already are," she corrected softly. Benji stepped forward without hesitation, his medical training evident in how he assessed the girl's physical condition. Tired, hungry, frightened, but basically healthy. "Lucy," he said with the gentle authority that made him such an effective healer, "would you like to meet the other children? We have 42 brothers and sisters who can't wait to welcome you home." The transformation began immediately. Within hours, Lucy was giggling with children her own age while older students helped her unpack her meager belongings. The Academy's family absorbed another lost soul with the practiced ease of those who remembered their own rescue. That evening, as Edamie tucked Lucy into bed in a room she'd share with 3 other girls, the child asked the question that had haunted her since her parents' death. "Will you really keep me forever?" "Forever and always," Edamie promised. "That's what families do. Governor Evans arrived the following week with an entourage of territorial officials and Eastern investors. His 3-day visit included extensive observation of classes, interviews with students and parents, and detailed review of academic records. "Mrs. McGraw," he said during their final meeting, "I've seen educational institutions from Boston to San Francisco. None compare to what you've accomplished here. We've simply created an environment where children can thrive regardless of their backgrounds or circumstances." Exactly. The federal government is looking for innovative approaches to frontier education. Your academy could become the template for schools throughout the Western territories. The prospect was both thrilling and daunting. Success would mean their methods could help thousands of children across the expanding nation. But it also meant increased scrutiny and pressure to maintain impossible standards. 3 months later, federal legislation established the McGraw Academy educational model as the official template for frontier schools. Funding flowed in from Washington, along with requests from communities throughout the West. Edami stood in her original classroom on a crisp autumn morning, watching Lucy Henderson help younger children with their reading lessons. The girl had blossomed into a confident, caring sister to everyone around her. Benji entered carrying his medical bag, now preparing to leave for advanced training at the Territorial Medical College. His departure would be difficult, but his education required challenges the academy could no longer provide. "Miss Etta," he said, using the childhood address that would always connect them, "promise me you'll keep saving children who need homes. As long as there are children who need us, we'll be here. Then you'll never stop. There will always be more Lucy Hendersons waiting for someone to see their potential." She pulled him into a fierce hug, this remarkable young man who'd protected their family when he was barely more than a baby himself. "Give me 10 children and I'll give them the world," she whispered against his hair. The words had evolved from Cashin's desperate bargain into her personal mission statement. Every child deserved the chance to discover their gifts and pursue their dreams, regardless of where they started in life. Through the window, she could see Cashin reviewing architectural plans for their 7th building. Lucy chased butterflies in the garden, while older students practiced surveying techniques in the north pasture. Their story had become legend, but the legend continued growing with each child who found family where none had existed before. Love had conquered every obstacle. Knowledge had defeated ignorance. Hope had triumphed over despair. The McGraw Academy stood as proof that transformation was always possible when courage met compassion and refused to surrender. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.